And I'm here with the only other person I know who doesn't think it's too early to predict the Oscars. It's PT McNiff. How goes it, PT?
It goes well, Jen. You think the audience might think you're joking, but we do have other people who host this show, and they were like, why would we do that? That seems like an episode that doesn't need to happen. But we're here to prove them wrong. We're going to make it happen anyway.
Yes. So in case you're not, listening to us because we are keeping track of the state of the Oscars race for you, even this early in the year. We are on the precipice of fall film festival season, which if you are, not plugged into the Oscar race and kind of like the goings on of the film industry, basically there's just a slew, which we're going to talk about today a little bit, a slew of film festivals that are going to be boom, boom, boom happening over the next couple months. And this is really typically when the Oscar race solidifies in that, like, much can change between now and the spring, but this is sort of when frontrunners start to emerge, and big films, highly anticipated films, either flop or make a splash, and kind of like, and then we have a better set. So we, but we for some reason thought this would be really fun to, before all that happens, before all those clues come in, to make grossly uninformed predictions about who could get nominated. So we, to sort of like make hilariously inaccurate predictions now, and then we can kind of compare our notes after we have all the relevant information from the film festivals.
Let's get ourselves on the record when we don't know what we're doing, and then see what it looks like in the reality of what people think about these movies and how they end up doing.
Yeah, so this is sort of a backdoor hype episode. I know we've done a couple of those in the past. It's been a little while though. But yeah, this is really our kind of like Oscars temperature check, but it is still really early, and the temperature check will be a lot more accurate. The thermometer will be a lot more accurate in about 2 months. So we'll come back later with more accurate predictions. But yeah, and obviously we're going to also sort of sprinkle in our own likes for things that we've seen so far this year, right? So, because a lot of the things we're going to be talking about have already come out. A lot of it hasn't yet, but a lot of it has. So yeah, that's what you can expect from today's episode. So really, we're going to be nerding out about the year in film so far and sort of what's to come around the corner. But first, we're going to do a quick movie news check-in. All right, so what's new in the movie world right now? I didn't do extensive research for this because I was too busy agonizing over researching what other people's Oscar predictions were at this stage in the game to give you a little insight into what my brain has been like for the past week. The main things I know is that Barbie has joined the $1 billion club.
Mm-hmm.
Joined the ranks of Titanic and Return of the King.
The Avengers movies.
Yeah, Endgame, right? Infinity War, Endgame. There's a bunch of like huge blockbuster films.
The Force Awakens
club.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. So I think it hadn't. People were suspecting it might make it there, but I don't think last time we recorded it hadn't. Yeah. And then
it passed The Dark Knight for the most successful Warner Brothers movie.
Oh, that's right.
DC fans, fanboys in shambles.
The Barbenheimer beef continues.
Yes.
Really, just with a different Christopher Nolan movie. Yeah, so that's exciting. And like, I'm sure this is going to come up in some of our conversations about predictions later, but Barbie really, and Greta Gerwig in particular, keeps coming up as like a record breaker. Like that seems to be every day there's like a new headline that's like Greta Gerwig is the most profitable female director ever. Barbie is the most, the most profitable movie to be directed by a woman. Like I feel like I see variations on that every day now.
Yeah, I also haven't like dug too deep into the movie news, obviously, and this was the next thing on your list, Jen. I don't mean to step on your toes. The strikes continue. There's no real end in sight on those. There seems to but like there seems to be a few days every once in a while where it'll be like, oh, maybe they're getting closer, and then it seems to be. That is something that's leaked from the studio side to try to make them look reasonable, and then it falls apart. So there hasn't been a lot of movement there, which by extension means that a lot of things are still sort of up in the air about are they even going to still come out this year? Are they going to release some of the movies we're going to be talking about as unseen but hopeful Oscar contenders may not come out this year and may get held for when someone like Zendaya can go and promote it, as already happened with one of her movies. Another one of her movies might also be held back if the strike is still going on.
So yeah, this may be premature for our conversation that we're about to have, but I thought I was preparing myself for Dune's not coming out this year, and was like, had already started the grieving process for that.
Devastating.
But then all the critics that I read and listen to on a regular basis had Dune 2 in the mix for their discussion. So like I was like, I guess it's still happening. And so I looked it up. Right now, obviously a lot can change. Right now it's scheduled for November.
Mm-hmm.
I think November 11th or something like that. It's early to mid-November. But as we'll talk about, this might be a good segue, it doesn't currently have a film festival premiere.
Right.
Like it did, like Dune Part 1 did. Dune Part 1 had a very splashy, was it Cannes or Venice? I can't remember now.
I can't remember.
It had a splashy European premiere.
Dune's not coming out this year. Hey everyone, this is Greg from the future. When Jen asked me to be on this episode, I said, why bother? Dune's going to get delayed. And they didn't believe me. Now it's just painful to listen to Jen go on and on about whether or not Dune's coming out this year, because right after she and PT recorded this episode, Warner Brothers announced that Dune Part 2 would move to March 15th, 2024. That means, at least in terms of when I'm talking to you, it will not be eligible for the Oscars this year. Could the Oscars get bumped? Sure. And maybe then we'll need a third time period with a different voice coming on and correcting this episode. But for now, let's just say Dune is officially out of the Oscar contention. Now, you'll continue to hear Jen and PT give lots of really thoughtful predictions, and I will continue to pop in and let you know which ones just aren't true anymore. Now, what this really does mean in terms of my analysis is that a lot of the technical categories have been burst wide open. It seems to me that now one of these historical epics is going to come in and sweep a lot of them. If nothing else comes out this year, as of my recording this on August 29th, I think that means Oppenheimer scores big time and still might be the one to lead. But if Napoleon still comes out, if Killers of the Flower Moon still comes out, I think you're going to see whichever one of those three gets really, really popular sweep a lot of these technical categories. And that could still mean a really good race. And I think it's very likely that these Apple productions still come out because they have a lot more to gain throwing it on Apple TV Plus after a small theatrical run. They're not playing the same game that the major studios are playing with the strikes. So, hey, we still all believe you should support your actors and writers. And that means that all of us movie fans are just going to have to be okay being a little more patient. And really, what's the worst that could happen? Denis Villeneuve makes a better movie? Absolutely. All right. Listen to these idiots talk again.
I'm
you can look it up.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do want to keep doing regular strike updates, to close out the movie news check-in, I think. Because if you haven't been listening to us recently, we do see what we do here on this podcast as criticism, which is distinct from promotion. And so for us, we feel like it's important to maintain critical discourse because, these films and shows and everything are coming out no matter what. There's no stop it, like, other than the delays that we've been talking about. Like there's going to be stuff coming out. Things are still happening, just in a different way, without actors, without writers. But my philosophy that I've kind of arrived at recently is that the absence of criticism is the equivalent of promotion, right? If no one's here to kind of keep a critical and balanced perspective, then things that are coming out really only have promotion from the studios kind of as voices out there. So we want to keep updating, spotlighting the strike, and that's kind of how we're sort of showing our solidarity with the cause. But the only concrete thing I've actually heard is that the WGA resumed talks with the studios, and that the only thing that they've really made any traction on, and this is very minuscule traction, is that they are now starting to talk about minimums for writers' rooms. So, like, how many writers could be hired in a writer's room? Because one of the issues, I think, was that oftentimes series had too few writers, and it's kind of like torpedoing the industry in terms of like writers can't mentor each other, and like it's also just being overworked and undercompensated, and so there's a lot of issues there. But that's the one thing I've kind of heard that's a concrete like talking point that's come up recently.
Yeah, the other thing that I had heard, which is somewhat outside of the actual negotiations of the strike, but still seems relevant, and I saw discussion of it being relevant to the negotiations, is there was a court, I don't know if it was a circuit court or an appeals court, but a judge somewhere ruled that something created via an AI tool could not be copyrighted by the person who inputted something into that tool. And it's basically like a person needed to have done the creation for copyright to take effect. And if it's done via an algorithm, a program, then it's not eligible for copyright, which of course the movie studios do not want to make movies or TV shows that are not eligible for copyrights, as seen by Disney continually lobbying to extend copyright protections and rules forward in time, so they don't have to ever let people just do whatever they want with Mickey Mouse. So that would be a radical shift and might severely undercut the studio's position of we want to be able to use AI to do a first draft of a script, because that might hurt their bottom line ultimately. So this may be because I'm hearing it from outlets and people and sort of discussing people doing the discussions who lean more in support of the actors and the writers, because that's my bias about it. And so, but that they are saying, oh, this is actually really good for us and our position. This will it reinforces and helps advance our goals about the rules around AI.
Well said. Yeah. So the things are happening maybe at a glacial pace, but there's, at least compared to last time we talked about this, something to talk about. Yes. As opposed to nothing's happening. So there's that at least.
I will say that, I am worried just for my own enjoyment that Dune Part 2 might get, would be one of the movies that would get pushed back.
It would.
I do feel like that's a movie that's so spectacle based and also so director driven that you do want the actors. You want Timothée Chalamet, you want Zendaya, you want Butler. What's his first name? Aaron?
Austin Butler.
Oh my God, I couldn't remember his name. He's
Oscar nominee Austin Butler, BT.
Sure. We don't know if he's still talking in the Elvis voice because he can't do appearances, but he, they would be important. They would love to have them, but that may not be as crucial as when I was looking up. Again, we're sort of pushing immediately into our further discussion, that one of the movies that is still on a bunch of prediction, sort of mid-year prediction lists, is The Piano Lesson, which is based on the August Wilson play, which is produced by Denzel Washington, starring John David Washington, I think directed by another Denzel son / John David brother. And then a big push would be for Samuel L. Jackson to finally get an Oscar in the supporting role that he plays. But that's like, presuming it's somewhat similar to Fences, another August Wilson production that's very actor heavy, very actor focused. So there's been no release date set to that. And the assumption has been there's no way they'll release that until they know for sure Sam can go out and try the Jamie Lee Curtis path of, I'm going to go talk to people, I'm going to be at all the events, I'm going to chit chat with everybody. This is the time we're making it happen with Samuel L. Jackson. So that will probably not make it this year. It might not have done so anyway, because I don't know where it is in production. But even if it's filmed and they could edit it and put it out, they wouldn't do it now because they don't have the campaign push that
Mm-hmm.
they need for the award that they want to get for it. Whereas the composer, the editor, the effects, the cinematographer, all that good stuff for Dune Part 2 can still happen and still unfold even with the strikes.
Nope.
Now all I can think about is I'm ready for a Samuel L. Jackson Oscar campaign. That sounds
Yeah.
amazing.
But aren't you glad it's not against Robert Downey Jr.?
Yes. Oh, that would be awkward on so many meta levels. That would be really weird. All right. So yeah, as you can already tell from the way we're talking, we keep going back to these film festivals, is that I think the original assumption was that there might be slim pickings at these film festivals, because I think a lot of pundits and critics originally assumed, because of the strike, sort of the thing PT was talking about was like, well, you can't have your stars showing up to promote it, so do you just not do it? Is it worth it to still send the film? Most of these are still on, they're going ahead, right? They're, because they have other crew members, cast people, directors, right? People who are not striking are still able to go. I've heard a lot of kind of like fishiness of like, which I think thankfully is largely airing, I think, on the side of actors who are also directors not going. So like a big thing was that Bradley Cooper, who's the director of Maestro and also starring in Maestro, he is very verbally said he is not going to any of the festivals. So that whereas a lot of people were like, oh, can some people use a loophole where if they are there as the director of something but they also happen to be an actor, like, is that going to be okay? And it sounds like people are not going to be doing that, which is, I think, good.
That sounds right. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to give a little bit of context to our listeners, right? Because my assumption here is that we're the go-between, right? If you're really into movies and you care what we're talking about, but you're not sort of like obsessively following news and absorbing the critical discourse around new movies coming out and what's going to come out and who's doing what this year and what's going to get an Oscar, like all that stuff. We're here to kind of to give you the kind of more digestible take on what's going on. And so I just wanted to kind of run through a little bit of context for like what is fall film festival season, because that's something that automatically means a lot to me, but doesn't necessarily mean a lot to someone listening to this. So PT, what are your associations with fall, quote unquote, fall film festival season?
I just want to say that I thought that what you were going to say, you sort of hung on the F sound, and you were like, we want to do a short version of where things are right now. I want to start with the context. What is film? And you were just going to be like, back the moving daguerreotype was first developed, and really dig into that, which I think would have been fun. Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is this is when the hype train really begins. It's been interesting that there are festivals that happen earlier in the year. Sundance is, I feel, pretty central for us, for like you and me now, because they've been doing online access since the pandemic started, and so we're actually able to like watch some of those movies if you're able to get tickets for it. So that's fun. And then Cannes is obviously a big international one that happens in May, but now is the time when the movies that studios, both sort of traditional and the streaming studios, feel like, okay, we want to start building our narratives. And a lot of Oscar campaigning, a lot of Oscar discourse is about not necessarily the movies themselves, but the story of the movies and the story of the season, which I think we've talked about this before, but my feeling is that that's what divides people who hate the Oscars from people who love them. Is the people who hate the Oscars are just like, that doesn't matter to them, or that's not appealing in any way, and so they end up feeling just like, okay, like, I don't know, how do you judge these movies, or like, this isn't a fair, the George C. Scott, like, you can't judge art against each other. This is inanity and borderline cruelty to do that. Or it's the sort of, oh, it's a fun, like, how do people do things? What's the sort of zeitgeist of this weird organization, the Academy, and what is that going to do, what effect's that going to have on what people think about film history? Not that you have to win an Oscar to, sometimes not winning an Oscar is even better for your place in history than not. But it's all about these narratives, and the narratives start at these festivals. And, there are, I don't have the intricate knowledge that I feel the long-term Oscar reporters who get to go to the festivals really do. But there's like if you have this kind of movie, you go to Toronto, you try to get the like audience award there, and like the movie that wins the audience award that premieres in Toronto gets like nominated for Best Picture like 9 out of 10 times. Or like you go to Venice and you try to get like, this kind of an audience buzzing about it. And that gets you like injected into the conversation in a different way. So yeah, I don't, I'm not as keyed in to the intricacies of the festivals themselves. I just get very excited to start to get those initial reports of, like, how did this play? Like, what were people happy about this? How do I calibrate my expectations and my excitement levels for these different movies? How about you?
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of the reporting on the ground in terms of like how audiences reacted, and in terms of there's lots of schmoozing that happens, although less so this year because there are going to be fewer actors. But there's a lot of schmoozing that happens kind of like after parties, and people meet up with each other and kind of networking between critics and creators. And so there's the most famous one I remember in recent years was the Telluride Film Festival, which is in Colorado, had a very strong showing from Renee Zellweger when they screened Judy, which she then went on, I believe, to win an Oscar for.
That was like a cleat. She just marched through that whole season.
Yeah. And so it was, that was many, many months before the Oscars. But I remember hearing tons of reporters saying people were just like falling all over her. She was charming the pants off everybody in the room, right? Everyone, like, I remember, I don't know why I remember this particular thing in so much detail, but I remember this was the first time when I was listening to critics and podcasters where I was like, oh wow, like these really do matter a lot, because it was sort of like, it swayed she was like, Judy as a film was not really on anybody's radar, and then suddenly everybody was like, oh, we got to pay attention to Renee Zellweger and Judy. So I think that really was the first story I remember hearing that was like, had nothing to do with the quality of the film. Like, people didn't talk about the film Judy. They just talked about Renee Zellweger's flannel shirts and how she was really nice to everybody. Like, you know what I mean? And so it's weird because there's all this sort of, and that type of thing can happen at the drop of a hat when no one expects it. And so that's partly actually why I wanted to do this episode before all that happens, right? Because this is sort of like, objectively speaking, thinking about these movies just based on their premises and who's involved and what they're about, like, what do we think? And to see how far astray that goes after the film festivals when all this other stuff. And again, it might be very different this year because there won't be actors at the festivals doing that kind of charming. But yeah, it'd be really interesting to see. And the other thing too is like just films that people were like, this is going to be the next greatest thing, and everyone's like, oh, never mind, right? Because once people see it, they realize it's not really that good. So, or it doesn't live up to their expectations. So, yeah, there's a lot that can happen at these festivals.
Looking at what I kept thinking about the audience award. It's the People's Choice Award at the Toronto Film Festival. You have to go back to 2011 for the last time the winner of that award didn't get a nomination for Best Picture.
That's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And let's see, 1, 2, 3 of them have won Best Picture. Nomadland, Green Book. That was the beginning of the Green Book.
Jojo Rabbit is a TIFF winner, right?
Jojo Rabbit is it won the People's Choice Award winner, and 12 Years a Slave did as well. So yeah, I mean, these are all, movies that had, generated a lot of momentum.
Yeah, it's a weird chicken and egg thing where like the fact that they are at these festivals already gives them a certain boost of buzz, but at the same time, how they do at the festivals afterwards, like if they win awards or like what the response is, right? That also kind of like changes the course of their Oscar campaign, oftentimes very
Yeah, and I do
drastically.
think there's having spoken off mic with Antonio, once and future co-host of the show, who has gone to the Toronto Film Festival once, I believe. He has said that you're seeing so many movies that when a movie is good, you're like, oh my God, like this is amazing, because you do see a lot of movies that are like, eh. So I think that another part of the narrative is the critics who watch it, and how, they may end up seeing, I don't know, like 25 movies, and like 3 of them are ones that they're like, oh, this was really good, I liked this. And that gives even more sort of credence and momentum to those movies when maybe not all 25, but like a good number of those 25 arrived with some hype. And so then the hype, continues and grows.
So just as a quick rundown, again, because our job is to filter and make this less complicated for you who's listening, I'm just going to give a quick rundown in case you want to know what the film festivals are, and then just like name a couple for each. I have a longer list in our Google Doc, which PT's like, oh wow, are we going to go through all these? We're not. I was just going to do like a quick rundown of like what the major film festivals are when we refer to fall film festival season. Like, what are we talking about? So Telluride, which we already mentioned, is coming up first. That's in Colorado. A lot of the films that already premiered at Cannes are also going to be playing there. Zone of Interest, Anatomy of Fall, I think are going to come up multiple times in our conversation for the rest of the episode. So those are big ones. And Poor Things is also speculated, could very well be. So this is the problem, is that Telluride is the first one that's coming up, but it's the one that there's the least certified information about. So like I was listening to Awards Watch, which like they go, if you think we're getting down to the nitty gritty, they are just like at a next level sort of like level of detail and kind of speculation. They had a whole.
They're the 300. They're the 300 level class.
Yes, we're just the 101. Yes, but they had a whole episode just on Telluride, not just on just like fall film festivals. So they were kind of like just speculating, like, oh well, based on what we know about the other festivals, like which ones are going to be at this one. The big one that stood out to me that I think didn't pop up with the other ones is a film called, which we might not talk about again, is a film called The Iron Claw, which is mostly notable because we keep being haunted by the bear on the show. And so this is a wrestling movie. It's like a biopic about a family of 4 brothers. And I think the description, the log line was like, they're all wrestlers and they all like, they meet a series of like tragic circumstances or something like that. Like a bunch of them die young or something like, like, and this is it's based on a true story. So like, if you're familiar with who they are, I guess you already know what happens. But Jeremy Allen White, who's the star of The Bear, is in this movie. And I think it was Eric Anderson on Awards Watch made a really chilling point once he said it. I was like, oh, whoa, where because they moved the Emmys to January, which is like the thick of Oscar season, like Oscar campaigns are like at their height, arguably after the end of the year, that he's probably going to win for The Bear. Mm-hmm. And does that give him a huge boost to then get nominated for an Oscar? Or like to win, or I think he would already have to be, because nominations come out shortly after the Emmys.
Right.
And
that would be in a sort of reflection of the year Matthew McConaughey, the week we peaked in the McConaissance, was, it's like he's in Dallas Buyers Club, and he has that great scene in Wolf of Wall Street. Like he could have gotten a supporting nomination there, but a lot of the energy was, man, he's so good on True Detective. That first season of True Detective was like dominating the discourse, that it was like, of course he's going to win an Oscar, even though True Detective is a TV show and not a movie.
Yes.
So, but like it could be a similar thing. that's
like
the
he's just like
energy
everybody's
is
into
out
him at
there.
the same time, and then it's just he's in the right place at the right time. So that's the main reason to pay attention to that movie, I think. Otherwise, I'm not sure that movie would really be on my radar. But it also has Zac Efron, I think.
I mean, with his post injuries, his first movie, I think, in
Oh,
a
that's
little
right.
while.
Yeah. So I don't know. So people seem somewhat excited about that movie, and to my knowledge, I think the process of elimination that Awards Watch had was that like it has to be a Telluride because they haven't said it's at anywhere else. Anyway, I've already spent too long talking about that. So that's Telluride. That's coming up first. Overlapping with Telluride is the Venice Film Festival. This one seems to have so many heavy hitters. So most notably, Michael Mann's new movie Ferrari, which is starring Adam Driver and Penelope Cruz. Which the more I hear about the movie, the more I'm like, wait, why wasn't this really on my radar before? Maestro apparently is going to be there, which I thought was weird because I was like, I thought it was a big deal that was going to be at New York. But anyway, Priscilla, which is like the yet another Elvis movie, but it's by Sofia Coppola, so we care. It's very complicated. I'm like, I don't know if I can handle another Elvis movie right now. But I'm like,
you can handle a Sophia Coppola.
But I can
movie.
handle a Sofia Coppola movie, right? Like that got me. Like I'm out. I'm in. It's complicated. David Fincher's The Killer, and a bunch of other movies. So that one I was like, whoa! Like Venice really is bringing the heat.
And Venice is where Dune premiered, the first.
Oh, that's right. Okay,
for the record.
I knew it was.
I did look it up.
I knew it was one of the two. So yeah, so maybe that's gonna land there, but they just haven't announced it yet for whatever reason.
It won't.
So we'll see. And TIFF, which is the Toronto International Film Festival, this is the one we keep talking about, where a lot of times films that win that People's Choice Award or Audience Award, I don't remember what they call it there.
It was People's Choice.
It's people. Okay. It's funny because I feel like I never hear critics referring it to it that way. So I mean, they just don't like the phrase "People's Choice." But yeah, this one has Taika Waititi's next film, Next Go Wins, which no critics I follow seem to be excited about. They're actually quite disdainful. Like really, people really turned on Taika Waititi.
There's some sort of inflection point. I think it was to some degree his public persona with like when he was maybe in a polyamorous relationship and people were like, we don't want to hear about it, dude. And then there was just a lot between Our Flag Means Death, What We Do in the Shadows, both on TV, and then Thor: Love and Thunder coming out. I think that there was a exhaustion was hit, and it also kind of coincides with the Marvel exhaustion in general, and Taika's humor has been sort of subsumed into like part of one of the the kind of humor that's in a Marvel movie is connected with Taika because he had such an impact with Ragnarok, and some of that's carried forward. I think so I think that there's this real sort of sense of people being over him, but I don't know. I think that movie could, surprise people. They'd be like, oh, right. Like, this isn't about a superhero. This is just like a fun little movie from him. And people might be pleasantly surprised.
TIFF is also going to have Dumb Money, which is the Seth Rogen, America Ferrera GameStop shorting movie.
Sure.
I don't know if I described that correctly, but the big GameStop stock thing that happened.
Mm-hmm.
They're making a movie.
Yeah, shoot the moon. Go hold the diamond. Something like
That's
that.
one of those sounds right. Alexander Payne's The Holdovers, which we're going to talk about later probably, and a Sylvester Stallone documentary, which people were like, is Sylvester Stallone going to go to TIFF? Can he go to TIFF? Because he's just, and there's a large discussion about like, is there a loophole through which he could go to TIFF, not as an actor? I haven't heard one way or the other. And then the other one, which I only mentioned because I don't think it's going to come up again, but because I think it's not going to be part of this season, but probably next season, is a Kate Winslet film where she stars as a war photographer. It's called Lee, but then also Andy Samberg is there. I was like, what is this movie? I don't know. But that doesn't have a distributor yet. Like, no one's bought that movie. And so my guess is that that's not going to be eligible, because by the time, if it comes out at TIFF and then someone buys it, right, they're not releasing it probably until 2024. So that one I just thought was interesting as like I didn't know this was a movie that was happening.
That feels like a movie where they're going to want the two of them
Yes.
out promoting it. So yeah, I think I could see that even if they had someone to distribute it, they might be like, well, maybe let's hold back and let's have, even if it's Andy Samberg sort of being serious in the movie, like they'll want.
Yeah, I'm like, is this an Adam Sandler Punch Drunk Love situation? Like, what is happening?
Jack Black and King Kong.
Yeah. He was actually pretty good in that. The other one, just to go back to the Jeremy Allen White bit, there's yet another movie he's in called Fingernails, which I actually put a link in the Google Doc. I don't know. Do you know about this movie, PT? Look up the cast of this and then tell us about it. Like, click on the link, because I want to hear your reaction.
Yeah, good. I mean, good cast. An upcoming American science fiction romance film, directed by Christos Nikou, who does not have a Wikipedia link. That's always an intriguing thing. But yeah, Jesse Buckley, Riz Ahmed, Jeremy Allen White, Annie Murphy, and Luke Wilson. That's a good list.
Right?
I had seen that he was in another movie, but that like it was like, oh, it's another Apple TV movie. And I was like, oh, well, then it's probably.
It also, if you read the premise, it sounds like it's ripping off The Lobster, which is the Yorgos Lanthimos movie, but because it's about like couples and like assessing couples or something like that. Right. Anyway, so that's TIFF. And then the last like really big one, and then there are two like sort of big ones, is NYFF, New York Film Festival. The big news for that is like they dropped the announcement that Maestro was going to be the kind of like their centerpiece film for that festival, and that's when the trailer came out, and so like that seemed like a big deal.
They saw the nose, and they were like, "We're not doing this,"
and then
we're not into it.
You gotta make the nose doesn't play joke.
I mean, I was gonna wait until later,
okay.
But I did. Now we have to. Now the nose. I don't know if the nose plays. The nose may not play.
Yeah, we'll talk more in a little bit, I think. And Miyazaki's The Boy and the Heron, which I was super excited about, or I've been super excited about, and then I'm excited that that's getting a big splashy premiere. There's a film called Foe with Saoirse Ronan and Paul Mescal, who are both very lauded actors. People are very excited. And then finally there's another movie called All of Us Strangers, which tons of critics seem to be up in arms about, in terms of like excited for. So
that's the new like buzzy movie that I feel like everyone's like, don't forget about All of Us Strangers. Like that's going to have an impact. And I don't know if that's based on anything. I don't know if anyone's seen it.
I think so. I think people are just excited by the cast, and they're excited about the premise. They think the premise is funky and interesting.
But it has that energy that Past Lives had, like before Sundance, where it was like, actually, this is the one that everyone should see, which doesn't mean it will take off and be that good, as good as that. But everyone's saying keep their eye on it. So another Paul Mescal joint.
Yes. So yeah, he's gotten very busy after being nominated for an Oscar, going from no one ever heard of him to nominated to an Oscar, and now he's making all these movies. So he's doing it right. This also stars Andrew Scott, which people may know as the hot priest from Fleabag,
or Moriarty from the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock.
That's actually probably a better reference for our audience, I would guess. And Claire Foy.
If you haven't seen Fleabag, everyone should go see Fleabag if they've not seen Fleabag.
Just stop listening to us and go watch Fleabag.
Yes.
You have not seen it. So those are the big heavy hitters. The other two that I feel like when I've heard Oscar pundits sort of like mulling over film festival season, BFI and AFI, the British Film Institute, the American Film Institute, like they have premieres, like things happen with them, but they are nowhere near as important, it seems, as all the other ones we just mentioned. So, but in terms of this season, Saltburn, which I kept panicking, being like, wait, why is Saltburn not coming out at any of these festivals? Like, where is Saltburn? Where is Saltburn? And then I'm like, oh, it's because Emerald Fennell is British, and she's committed Saltburn to the London Film Festival, which is the British Film Institute's festival. So I was like, oh, that makes more sense. They're waiting for it to premiere there. Um, as like a nationalist move, I guess.
Sure.
So that'll be good, but that'll be later in the season. That'll be October. London Film Festival's in October, and then AFI is sort of the last one where like occasionally a film will premiere at AFI that ends up mattering. Like, but that one right now, because it's so far out, it's October 25th, has no announcements or even rumors about what's premiering there. So we'll have to see. But there are two sort of glaring omissions. Both films that we've talked about quite a bit, probably on this on the show so far. One is Dune Part 2, which we already talked about, where it's like that might still pop up somewhere as having a big premiere. But like, and then my worst fear is that maybe it not being scheduled at a film festival yet means that there's still a possibility that gets pushed to next year.
It's not coming out, guys.
Because they were threatening that, or there were rumors about that. But yeah, so that's one that doesn't have a home yet. At least that hasn't been announced. And then Ridley Scott's Napoleon, which I know PT is super excited about. I'm also excited about.
I'm excited about it.
I finally watched the trailer. It looks great. It brought me back to Gladiator, probably because there's one shot of Joaquin Phoenix putting on a crown. And I'm just like, we're back. This is Gladiator.
We're doing it.
But the fact that this movie, and I looked it up, and there are articles that are like, it's definitely not at any film festivals. Like it's skipping film festivals. So I'm like,
which
what does that mean?
I'm curious. I don't know. I mean, it could be a few things. One, the obvious concern is it's not good, and they don't want to show it to anyone before it's going to come out in a controlled promotional push. The second, which I think also potentially likely, is it will not be finished until the day it's supposed to premiere for, I think there's a theatrical release set, and then it will be on the Apple service because it's another Apple Plus movie, that it will be, it's basically he's going to be editing and they're going to be doing the effects for it right up until, they'll rip it from his hands and put it in the theaters. The third thing is I did look up the last Ridley Scott movies. Of course, he released 2 movies in 2021, one of which was excellent and immediately forgotten, and one of which was House of Gucci. And the excellent one, The Last Duel, was a Venice Film Festival premiere, and then kind of just died on the vine. It petered out and disappeared. Whereas House of Gucci just got like a premiere at a theater in London, and was released. And that, I mean, I think it ended up only getting hairstyle and makeup, but it had the Lady Gaga, like the sensation that Lady Gaga was right on the outside of Best Actress that year. So it got traction. So I don't know if Ridley Scott thinks about it this way or cares about it, but it might just be like, he doesn't need festivals. He just releases the movie and then let the people figure it out. So it could be any of those things. I'm hoping it's not because it's not good.
He could also just be Ridley Scott being a curmudgeon, being like, I'm not gonna play the film festival game. People can just watch this movie when it comes out. I can see that.
And then Michael Mann's looking at him like, we can do that? Like, we could just
not. An option?
Oh, okay. While Jen was talking before, I was trying to find, there's no like history of the AFI festival. Like the AFI festival page is only about this year. There's no Wikipedia page for it. There's no like news stories about what happened last year. So I'm sure if I had more time, I could find more information, but it is a surprisingly under Googleable film festival.
That's kind of weird that it's so shadowy. And like, again, like it's one of those things where people bring it up in the context of the Oscars race, like occasionally. It's pretty rare that anyone cares, but it's a thing. Anyway, so hopefully that was probably more information that you wanted about film festivals coming up, but just, I think it helps to know that kind of like the list, because you hear critics offhandedly reference them all the time, or at least I do. And it can be a lot to keep track of if you don't know that they're separate things, like if you don't know which one's which. But yeah, so I think now we've already started talking about this a little bit, which makes me think should have probably started the rhetorical situation before I gave all that context. But here we are. So I think we're going to move into the rhetorical situation again to kind of extend a little bit more context or discussion about kind of like how the Oscar race works. And then we'll go into sharing our predictions. So the rhetorical situation, a segment in which we look at, well, not a film, but the Oscars race through the lens of our academic experiences.
It's just so noble.
It is.
I love it.
I almost didn't pick it for that. Like, I'm like, is this too stuffy? But I think that's us making fun of ourselves as academics. I kind of like it in that context. So
I think that's correct.
So anyway, if this is your first time listening to us and you're like, what is happening right now? In the teaching of writing, the rhetorical situation refers to any contextual factors that influence composing and interpretation, right? So we see that as being like really relevant oftentimes to what we're talking about in the film world. And so my question to you, PT, is what contextual factors do you feel like impact the Oscars race in general, or what the Oscars race is going to be like this year, kind of looking ahead?
Oh man. I mean, I think in general it is whether people choose to play along with this or not. It's all about the story and the narrative of what's happening. I think there's some people who are just like, no, I shut that out. I just choose what I think is the best of this. But that's sort of like the people that are like, well, there aren't these arguments that exist in the world around me, or I want to keep politics out of my sports or my entertainment or whatever. Where it's like, no, like it's always there, and like the choice you're making to try to have the absence of that, the attempt to have the absence of a narrative in your Oscar voting or your Oscar predicting is still a narrative choice to try to do that. So there are these meta narratives that are at play where the Academy is trying to grow and evolve past the sort of Oscars so white feeling and history of the sort of dominant culture having such sway over the voting body and by extension the movies that are awarded. And so there have been dramatic shifts in the makeup, the constituency of the Academy, and that has I think helped. It's shifted things a little bit, where we have seen some movies that are about underrepresented populations that have gotten a lot of momentum, a lot of attention. There's blowback to that. There's a sort of push and pull around all of that, and then there are some potential narratives, which we will get into. I won't say yet which ones, about individual people, filmmakers, actors. Or movies as sort of their own cultural product that at this point, again, this is very premature. It's super early, but there are already stories that are starting to come together from movies that we have seen that have come out of like, oh, like, is this, last year, Everything Everywhere All at Once had been out for like 4 or 5 months at this point in the year. And people were like, man, we all love that movie. Like, what if that became something? And it did. And that sort of steamrolled and took off. So, there's some movies like that. There's other movies that we're looking at sort of down the road that also have their own narratives around them. So yeah, I think that it's all the kind of this push and pull between the past, the future, between like old school thinking, new school thinking, a reactionary isn't fair, but a sort of staid conservative approach to things versus a more progressive and outward, maybe flamboyant approach, and then also a tension between different people, and who's going to be the main characters of this Oscar race. We don't know yet, but there's some possibilities.
Yeah, and I think when we talk to our students, we often talk about values and how you can't build an argument without pinpointing what your values are and what your potential readers' values are going to be, and kind of negotiating kind of a push and pull of that. Because if you go kind of just start making your argument without having an understanding of the underlying values, right? You could just be off in space, like doing something that doesn't make any sense, right? And so, or making an argument that you don't want to make. I've had students do that where they're like, "Oh, I thought I was arguing this." I'm like, "Well, you're not." Turns out you're actually arguing for this other thing. But yeah, so and I think with the Oscars race, that is so relevant because very rarely is the discussion actually about an artistic meritocracy of any kind. And granted, that's sticky anyway because art is subjective, et cetera, right? There's always values at play when we talked about this with Indiana Jones, right? In terms of like what you think a good movie is dependent on from person to person. But I think what's more kind of hilarious about the Oscars is that oftentimes when people are talking about films that are going to win or not, they're just not even talking at all about the merits of it as a film. And they're more talking about sort of like, I hear all the time Oscars prognosticators saying like, well, this is the type of movie the Academy will feel good politically voting for, right? This is the social message is something that they want to sort of like virtue signal. And so that's going to win, right? Like that. I hear that speculation all the time. And then also like, campaigning also has negative campaigning, just like in politics. So I remember, I think it was Judas and the Black Messiah was like getting so much critical praise. And then there was an article, and this often happens, it's not just specific to this movie. But then there was an article that came out that questions its historical accuracy. And then it was like, forget it. Like it's done, right? Like everyone's going to be afraid to vote for this now because they're going to be like, well, it's not historically accurate. So I feel like that in the press cycles leading up to the Oscars, like there's always that kind of push and pull as well. So yeah, it's a lot of nonsense. What I wrote in our our Google Doc was basically what kind of nonsense happens with Oscar nominations, right? And this is how people get really up in arms about snubs, right? Because it was like people assume based on like how good a performance is that somebody has to be nominated, and then they don't get nominated, and it turns out, well, maybe it wasn't quote unquote their time, right? They're too new. There's all these other factors, and then there's also the thing of like someone is overdue, right? So we've talked about this before. I think like people win for the wrong movie because it's like they didn't win for the movie they should have won for, and now people are like, well, they need an Oscar, so that's what it becomes about, as opposed to the movie that's actually being nominated. So
there's a domino effect that's like, oh, like we need to give Art Carney an award for his career, so he's going to get an acting award. But that means Al Pacino's not going to get an award in the 70s, so now we have to give Al Pacino an award in 1992. But that means Denzel doesn't get an award from Malcolm X, so that means like we got to make sure we get Denzel an award for Training Day. And so that doesn't mean that those are not worthy performances, but sometimes those narratives supersede any kind of objective reality. To the degree there can be an objective reality about valuing art and what people actually care about, it instead becomes like, oh, it's this person's time. And I think what's interesting this year is we've got a lot of people who are young and new, and it could be like, oh, they're too young and or they're too new, or they're not like, incredibly, not like in their late teens, early 20s, but they haven't had a lot of Oscar success before. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, is it their time? Like, or, they're maybe like a little bit older, but maybe we should give them like a few more samples. And there's some other people who have been around a while, but they've already won like once or twice. And it's like, well, do we need to get them to the next level? Are they going to be a 2-time winner, a 3-time winner? And I think that's true in behind the camera and in front of the camera. So
one thing I have heard is that and again, to think about this year specifically, especially with the strikes happening, in the absence of actors campaigning and promoting, will people be lazy in their nominations, right? And fall back on people they've nominated before, right? Things that people are all like, just that are really in the zeitgeist, as opposed to like going to actually see a bunch of movies. You know what I mean? That's the other thing, is that like critics always complain that we go through all the trouble of seeing all the movies, and people who vote for the Oscars don't, that they just go by like hearsay and like, oh, I kind of like that person, or there's a bunch of other stuff. So my main point here is that we're about to share our predictions. And the main unsolicited advice I usually give people about the Oscars, emphasize unsolicited, no one asked me for advice about the Oscars, is that you have to go with these bigger narratives and kind of like these weird discursive values that are at play that are outside of the actual content of the movies. Because I think I've had friends in the past being like, oh, should I go see all these movies? And I'm like, well, do you want to win your Oscars pill? If the answer is yes, then you don't actually have to. That's the secret, is like, you don't actually have to have seen all the movies.
Selecting for your Oscar pool is not that different than playing fantasy football or fantasy baseball, where you don't actually have to watch these games. You just have to look at the numbers and the trends and the predictions of where things will go.
Right.
And you know, it's a different game. It's a different game than an actual evaluative attempt to find the best movie of the year, which, you know, even if there were some rubric by which you could do that, I think that it ends up being a fool's errand when it's, you know, great. It's great to talk about. I'm sure we'll have a discussion here on the show of what were the movies we liked best, et cetera, and what would we put as our top 5 or whatever of the year, separate from this awards thing. But that's not really, you know, functionally, that's not how the Oscars end up working, just because you know, I think it's just too hard to get. How many people is it? It's like thousands of people in the Academy to figure, you know, to get to any sort of a consensus about the taste of it all.
Yep. So, given all that, right? So just know that when we give our share predictions, it's not like these are not our personal picks. We are going to talk about things that we liked, but that predictions at the end of the day have to be, what do you think other people are going to like, and what's all the sort of extra contextual nonsense that's going to kind of push things one way or the other potentially. And also, like, a big thing too is we talk about Oscar bait. So like, what type of movie typically is popular with the Academy and gets on nominations, even if some other type of movie is also really good, right? Like, there's also that too.
Sorry, I will also say there's also sort of business level, company level questions as well, where, you know, a smaller studio like an A24, for instance, may be like, I got to choose, or Neon might be like, I got to choose one of these movies, or maybe 2 that I can really focus on and promote and try to get some awards things. And so a movie that either maybe comes out a little bit later, or that they aren't expecting people to respond to as well, or that you as a movie viewer may particularly like, and be like, how come no one is giving attention to that? And it's like, oh, it's, you know, it literally is just like, it's just not, you know, we don't have the brain space for it, or the promotion budget to get it in the hands of enough voters for it to get momentum. And you know, every year there's always you know, 1 or 2 movies that fall by the wayside. There's also the sort of the push and pull of these studios, and there's the general kind of battle lines drawn between traditional movie studios and the streaming places, Netflix, Apple, Amazon, where, you know, the traditional studios don't love them completely. And, you know, it's been sort of a narrative, like Netflix has never won Best Picture. They've spent a lot of money on a lot of boutique productions to try to get into that zone. Apple has won. Amazon's, I know, has won a bunch of acting awards. I actually don't know off the top of my head right now.
Yeah, Manchester by the Sea, I think it was their biggest success.
Yeah, which got actor and screenplay.
That's right.
But I don't think they've won Best Picture, but they've gotten, you know,
they've come close.
They have, and Netflix got very close. You know, people were thinking Roma would do it, but it didn't happen. So you know, there's that as well, where there's like, oh, well, are there voters who are still mad at Netflix? You know, are there voters who are actors who are mad at Netflix for, you know, trying to hold out on the strike for streaming things? So things, again, it's all outside of the relevance of the quality of the movie, or the performance, or the technical component that's being judged here. It's all these little narratives intersecting and threading together to become the season, the Oscar season.
Okay, so I think what we're going to do is we'll sort of switch off who's going to share their predictions first. We'll just go through a list of like, who do you think is going to get nominated in each category? And then if we want to, we can give some shout outs to things that we don't think are going to get nominated, but that we really liked personally, or that we thought was deserving, right? That just doesn't happen to fall into this, contextual quagmire of all these other factors we've been talking about. And then also, like, PT, you noted that we should check in on how we feel about movies we drafted, right? So like if there's something that has come out that we talked about in a previous episode, we can definitely chime in and kind of reassess that, because I think the winds have shifted in ways we have not expected in some cases.
Yeah. Our draft still looks pretty strong though. We'll get to it.
We may need to remind people what we drafted at some point, or like mention things that we drafted.
And by people, you mean ourselves. You mean ourselves, because I had to look it up.
I meant me, because I forgot already. Anyway, so let's start with we've got Best Animated Feature. I'll go first. So, and I generally did mine mostly in descending order of strength. So like, if something's first, number one is Across the Spider-Verse. I think that's the most likely to get nominated, and then we kind of descend from there. So I have Across the Spider-Verse, The Boy and the Heron, Elemental, Nimona, and Wish. Half of those are out already. So Spider-Verse, Elemental, Nimona. Boy and the Heron, as we said, is going to have a big splashy New York Film Festival premiere, North American premiere. It's already out in Japan, I'm pretty sure, and people are loving it. And Wish is slated, I think, for like a November, like probably a Thanksgiving-y holiday release, I would guess.
Yeah, that's in the frozen slot of like November 20 something to like get the Thanksgiving family.
Right, the holiday season spot.
Yeah,
the kickoff of the holiday season. So yeah, so that's what I have. My thinking generally, and then I'll kick it over to you, is I tried to spread. Usually with animated feature, it's like each major studio always gets a spot, even if the movies aren't as good. So like Netflix and Netflix, Pixar, and Disney recently, especially, have always kind of they have a slot in this list, and so like Elemental, even though it didn't get a lot of critical praise, I think is still getting in here. Just because it's a Pixar movie and it wasn't terrible. Like people neither loved it nor hated it, and so like it's just gonna be here. Wish is a big question mark. I feel like because I watched the trailer for that multiple times in preparation for this, to be like, what is the deal with this movie? Part of me is like, this is the jumping the shark of Disney movies.
Because it's the origin story of the star.
Right. It's like so much convoluted prequel nonsense that I'm just like, no, can't be good. But at the same time, it does also feel like it's kind of tapping into some classic golden age Disney movie tropes. And it is a musical. So like, I'm still on the hook for this one. I'm just like, but I'm very skeptical. The other possible contender I had in here was Super Mario Brothers, because it made so much money. I didn't know if it was going to have a Top Gun Maverick sort of thing to be like, thank you for keeping movie theaters in business, even though the people didn't like, critics didn't totally love the movie, but it did super well. So that could still pop in here. My personal pick, I don't think is going to get in here, I'll be interested to hear what you say, is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, which we haven't reviewed yet because we're waiting for Greg, go see that movie so we can review it. But I loved it, but I just don't. I think there isn't room for Spider-Verse and Turtles. What do you
That's
think?
it. I was wondering if there's the train had passed, like the Dungeons and Dragons movie. The train passed, and we're just not going to be able to talk. We have to do like a recap episode if we've got like a gap somewhere of like, let's talk about the movies we meant to cover, but not we saw it in a staggered way, so we couldn't all talk about it. Yeah, I love the Ninja Turtles movie as well. I will fully admit I did not. I didn't approach doing this the same way that you did, where I don't have like a 5 for each of these. I just was like, oh, these are the ones that I think are like the most important to talk about now, and then the others.
That's fine.
Later. But I had that as 5. I had that in like 5th in sort of the discussion thing, because I feel like Wish is nothing. Like Wish is just going to be like, okay, like, thank you for playing. And I
just spit my water, listeners.
There was a spit take. I didn't want to bring it up, but like I also feel like there may be between the individual craft category voters, and also, yeah, I guess it wouldn't matter for the wider Academy. I think just I guess I don't remember who votes for the animation film, if it's the whole Academy or just people who are in some sort of like animator division. But I think there might be some okay, Disney, like calm down. And there being both a Disney and a Pixar movie this year isn't guaranteed because Disney has been particularly crappy. Bob Iger's been particularly crappy around the strikes. Maybe
Fair.
I'm overvaluing that. But Elemental has this. I got to keep going back to narrative, but it has this little engine that could thing going where I did just see it not worldwide, but its international box office just past Spider-Verse. Like it is like just
What?
making money. It is at like 307 million international, and Spider-Verse is at like 302 or 303. Like it's like it came out and everyone's like Elemental flop. Like put it on the pile of the flops of 2023, but it's just stayed in the theaters. People have been going to see it. It's always in the top like 6 or 7 for the last like few months at the box office. So by the time we get to the voting nomination time, I think that could be pretty strong. I think that's going to be a strong third place movie. But this is really Spider-Verse versus Miyazaki. I think that's what it feels like it's going to be. And then I think Elemental third, I would, I guess actually I would have, for me, I would think if I was just going to throw out there like easiest predictions, Mario Brothers and the Ninja Turtles. Very child of the 80s of me to say that. But I think it's actually more likely that neither of those two get in, and it's going to be two movies that are maybe on this list, but this list was put together like 5 days ago, and I already don't remember what most of these movies are, because it's just sort of like, oh, it's this movie based on a comic book that was independently produced and sold like 100 copies. But it's going to be really beautiful, and it's going to like win some sort of animation festival somewhere and get this momentum into a nomination, which I feel like there's usually like one or two of those that come out. So
yeah, looking at this list, there isn't like a clear, I guess The Boy and the Heron would be the Pinocchio comp, but like there aren't, to me, when I made this list, I was like, there aren't quite enough like artsy indie animated films on here. Nimona actually, so I didn't finish Nimona because my kids thought it was too scary. Which says more about them than the film, to be clear.
Yeah.
But and so I'm meaning to finish it, but I just haven't gotten around to it. But what I watched about probably the first 45 minutes of it. It was quite good. The animation style is really beautiful. Voice acting is spot on. It's very funny. It has a lot of Turning Red vibes. Not in the teenage sense, but in the I can turn into animals sense. So like I would say if you're a fantasy fan, if you haven't seen Nimona, check it out.
Okay.
So that's the closest to me is to, because the Netflix pick is usually something that's a little bit on the artier side.
Yeah.
Because as you said, they are desperate for Oscars, and so they back movies that they think are going to win.
In there. Is The Inventor a Netflix movie? Because that's a stop motion movie, and I do think there's a section of voters that are just like, yes, this is a style. Well, and
I think I couldn't find out when that was coming out. Is the problem?
Yeah.
I
guess it's not going to be released. Oh, it's going to be released by Blue Fox Entertainment on September 15th.
Oh.
I don't know what Blue Fox Entertainment is. It's founded by Todd Slater and James Huntsman.
Oh, it's got a good voice cast. Stephen Fry, Daisy Ridley, Marion Cotillard. Huh.
Yeah.
So yeah, this would fit the bill for what I think is missing from the list. So
yeah. I will also say something that I had kind of dismissed as like, I don't know, whatever, sort of like you have Migration on here. Which looks,
I was just trying to name all the animated movies that were coming out.
No, it's great. Like that's the movie that it's like, oh, maybe, but then it's like, if you're going to do an Illumination movie, you would do Super Mario Brothers, I think. Which I think, like Despicable Me 2, I just looked up, got a nomination back when Despicable Me 2 came out. So there is a sort of a slot for a Super Mario Brothers type thing. But there is a sequel, maybe long awaited, I don't know, to Chicken Run.
No, that's
Chicken
right.
Run 2.
The Dawn of the Nugget.
And that's Aardman Studios, which, that the Wallace and Gromit people, they do tend, they have a cachet. The sequel
they
stuff
recast
is rough.
They recast Mel Gibson with, I believe, Zachary Levi.
No, they did not.
I think. Let me
That
look
would
this
be
up
wild.
now. I wanted,
That would be wild.
and I was like, well, that didn't pan out how you wanted it to. I could have sworn I saw that because I did see that. Yes, I'm correct.
They're like, it's fine. We've replaced him with Major League Baseball rising star Wander Franco. Wait a minute. You don't know what that's referring to, and you don't want to.
Okay,
So just trust me. That was a great joke.
Those are great jokes. Okay.
Or a terrifying joke.
Also, Tandy Way Newton. So she's stuck in this movie with Zachary Levi. Who arguably got his big break in Tangled. So maybe this is a good return to voice acting for him. But again, if the problem was to swap out Mel Gibson, who's problematic, for an actor, maybe at the time when they cast him that he wasn't, no one knew he was somewhat problematic.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway,
he was more like potentially weird than not problematic.
Yeah.
I will just note Chuck had been on for 3 years before Tangled came out, for the record.
Okay,
to defend.
Sure. I'm talking about animation though.
That's true.
Anyway, okay. I think we're good. We're good with this category. I mean, I'd say out of all these movies we've mentioned that are out already, obviously Spider-Verse is on VOD now. So if you didn't catch that in the theaters, you have no excuse. I suppose it'll probably pop up on a streaming service at some point, but I think they're probably going to hold it on VOD for a little while because it can't make money there.
As someone who still has not seen it, my excuse is I've been watching Star Wars Rebels before Ahsoka instead of watching that, because that I think got on VOD last week or like a week.
Yeah, it was August 8th, I want to say. And then I would say after you've seen that, then go see Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem, because it's
super fun. That one's great. Yeah. That's really good.
So funny. I'm still saying rightfully all the time, just randomly. So it's good. I should have saved that for our review. Sorry.
No, but I mean, we'll see if you're still saying it.
Yeah.
So up next, we have Best International Feature, which I'm super glad to be the one talking about this because nothing's come out. None of these have been released yet. But for me, I think there's 3 sort of clear candidates, and then we have some possibilities coming from below. And these are weird for those of you who do not know, because these are not nominated via the standard sort of Academy procedures. The countries decide. I guess the countries initially decide what movie to submit, which has led in the past to times when people are like, wait, what the hell? Like, why isn't this movie nominated for, like, RRR last year was the big example of this.
Where it couldn't have won or couldn't have been nominated because India decided it was not their pick.
Right. And the Academy can't overrule that. Yeah. Each individual nation submits their own.
Sorry, I was shaking my head earlier, not to say that you were getting it wrong, but to say that I do not approve of this process.
Yes. I don't know if this is my healthy ego or if this is my knowledge of how you feel about it, but I knew immediately that's what you meant. I did not feel chided in any way. But there was an immediate vigorous head shake when I brought it up. The 3 movies that I think can be expected, assuming that they are submitted by their countries, are Anatomy of a Fall, which would come from France, which won the Palme d'Or, if I am recalling correctly.
Yes. So everyone thought Zone of Interest was going to win, but then they swapped it.
Movie on this list,
where Anatomy of a Fall. Wait, now I'm getting it wrong. Because Sandra Hüller's in both of them.
It is.
So it's confusing. But it was one of those things where Zone of Interest, Anatomy of a Fall, one of them was the expected winner, and then the other one ended up winning the Palme d'Or.
Yes. So there's 3 sort of, there's like a bronze, silver, gold type awards set up at the Cannes Film Festival. And the third place is the jury prize. That went to Fallen Leaves from Finland, also in this discussion. The Grand Prix is sort of considered the second prize. That's Zone of Interest, which is British, but also Polish in terms of I don't know what the official home country is going to be. There's also an American studio involved, so maybe it won't be eligible for this. Unclear, but it is going to be German in the German language. So I don't know if that's going to
Yeah.
direct it
So
one
I
way.
looked this up. Zone of Interest, which if you haven't heard us talk about this movie before, is based on a Martin Amis novel.
R.I.P.
Oh, true. Yes, and that and it's about the kind of everyday life of a family that's living just a Nazi family that's living just outside of Auschwitz.
Mhm.
So this is a co-production between 3 countries: U.S., U.K., and Poland. Um, it looks
Much
like
like the Allied powers.
yeah, it looks like everyone's considering this a UK bid, but obviously we won't know until the countries sort of put forth their Oscar bids.
Right.
People are assuming it's going to be the UK because Brian Glazer is the director is British, but it was shot in Poland, I believe. So like there are other people in another camp that are like, well, if it was shot in Poland, and Poland in theory like is the closest to the actual content of the movie, like like it's so people are thinking it might be from that country, but we'll see.
Yeah.
But either way, I think
What
it's probably enough. I don't think it being a third US production would disqualify it.
that I don't know. That's what I'm not certain what the rules are on that. That would have required more research before we recorded a podcast episode about this. I will say it's Jonathan Glazer who directs it. Brian Glazer is Ron Howard's production partner.
That's right.
At Imagine It.
I knew I was going to get that wrong at some point.
It's tough. It's maybe too many Glazers. I don't know. And then Palme d'Or, the first place was Anatomy of a Fall, which is a movie from France about a sort of a trial. It's a courtroom movie investigating whether a man's death falling off of a balcony or out a window. It was murder, and his wife is at least it's an inquest. I don't know if it's like a full trial, but it's a courtroom proceeding. And there was a recent trailer for it, which we didn't bring up in movie news because we were going to get to it here, and it looks absolutely killer. And everyone, when it aired at Cannes, everyone was like, "This movie was amazing," and it looks great. It looks really good. Very excited.
Yes. So this one's for all the true crime junkies out there. That's what I've heard. Is that like any good true crime story, that it really has you on the edge of your seat the entire time. And in particular, that Sandra Hüller, who is the female lead, she's the wife who's like on trial. She's suspected of murdering her husband. Like, apparently, she is like really good at playing the ambiguity, where you're like, I really don't know if she did it until you find out. So, so I'm super excited about this. I love any sort of like procedural true crime courtroom drama story, and so the fact that this is a very good one has me extra excited. The trailer looks amazing. The trailer really did make it look like it's going to have all the things that someone who enjoys a true crime story would want, of like clues that we can then try to piece together, or like red herrings, or things that look bad but maybe are different. We find out later that they're like it looks like it has everything that you would want from a story like this. So I'm really excited about it.
To clarify, it's not true. It is a fictional story, but yes, that same sort of true crime, murder mystery instinct.
Yeah.
But yeah, done. Looks like it's done really well.
It clearly seems inspired by actual true crime stories.
Yes, true. The actual events, staircasey type events that have happened. So this feels to me like the movie that is in line for the Parasite or Life is Beautiful, where it's like, like I'm the foreign movie, or the international movie, but I'm actually also in like above the line categories in the main competition, and I'm gonna really kind of, and All Quiet on the Western Front, of course, last year also doing this, where it's like, but I'm shoring up international features. So I feel like without only people that can having seen it, I feel like Anatomy of a Fall is an early leader of the pack.
So this might be a good time to segue into my list of nominees that I'm predicting.
Please.
I actually do not have Anatomy of a Fall on this list, and I'll
damn. Do you think France goes in a different direction?
Yes. So every year, a country messes this up. It seems like to me. And so, like, last year we said it was India didn't choose RR, and everyone was sad. So I had read that the director of Anatomy of a Fall, Justine Triet, in her acceptance speech for the Palme d'Or, apparently criticized the French government for some pension reform policy or something like that. Something about pensions in France.
I think there were strikes about that earlier in the summer.
Okay, that makes sense.
I don't understand it, but I think it was a big deal.
Yes. So yeah, it's a bit. Yeah, this seemed like a big deal, and so there's a lot of speculation that if France is choosing which film goes up, they're not going to appreciate what she said in her acceptance speech, and they're going to go another way. And if they do go another way, they are going to choose what was formerly called pot-au-feu. It is now called The Taste of Things, which, to my knowledge, is like a really, really well done comfort movie that shows lots of tasty cooking. So
the Great French Bake Off.
Yes, like, or but with like a relationship drama thrown in, right? Like, so like it sounds like the movie is legitimately good, but in terms of, again, we go back to our thing we were talking about in the rhetorical situation. If we're thinking about all these extra contextual factors, it seems like this is the type of movie that France would choose to represent itself to the rest of the world. And is much safer choice than Anatomy of a Fall, potentially. So that's why I have that. So I have Zone of Interest as my number one, because regardless of which country decides to take that one, it has so much buzz that it's got to be in here. The Taste of Things from France instead of Anatomy of a Fall, and people are going to be really upset about this.
Love it.
My third choice is Evil Does Not Exist from Japan. So this is Reisuke Hamaguchi's newest film. So if you recognize his name, he was the director of Drive My Car, which got a Best Picture nomination the year it came out.
It is a masterpiece.
Yes, it is amazing. And this one is described, I don't really know what the actual premise is, but it's been described as a climate change thriller, I want to say, or like some some environmental thriller potentially. So I think that made me think like, oh, this is very Academy friendly, because it's got a clear social issue, probably, and it's from a director that's already been nominated, not just in this category, but for Best Picture. So yeah, I'm there. And then I have El Conde from Chile, which this movie sounds almost too weird to get nominated, but it's from Pablo Larraín, who did. I mean, most people probably would know him from last year. Did Spencer actually get Spencer?
It was 2 years ago.
It was 2 years ago. Okay, he did Spencer the with Kristen and Jackie. Jackie actually got one of those got nominated.
Well,
right?
Kristen Stewart got nominated. The actresses both got nominated.
Films,
I don't know if
the films did not.
I don't know if the movie did.
Okay, that sounds right. That it was like a performance got spotlighted, but the movie didn't really do anything else. Anyway, so this movie is about, and I'm gonna get pronunciation wrong, probably. Pinochet, the dictator,
Augusto Pinochet,
is actually a vampire in this movie.
Yeah, I'm not certain because this was the other. I had this sort of bubbling as like my surprise pick, or it's no surprise to Jen, but like outside of my top three, which the third movie in my top three would not make it based on the country rules that we've already talked about. Because I was thinking that Japan would pick The Boy and the Heron to try to get Miyazaki something if it can't get animation. But you're right, they might go with the Hamaguchi movie instead. But yeah, I can't tell if the El Conde movie is set when Pinochet was a dictator and that he is a vampire, or if it's set in the future and Pinochet has lived another 200 years after being a dictator and is just like, I just want to die. But the setup is that he is a vampire who cannot die,
right?
And wants to, and either that's why he's a dictator or it's the fallout of him being a dictator. But it's this dark comedy. It actually kind of has like the description of it has Taika Waititi vibes to me, which is
Yep.
interesting. But I think based on both Jackie and Spencer, it might be a lot weirder and a lot less funny
Yes.
than that. It's going to be a lot bleaker and
more
darker
hallucinatory,
right?
more surrealist. Yeah, for sure. Either way, it sounds really interesting.
I'm down.
And then my last pick is, and this is purely based on just like all the critics who saw this. I believed it premiered at Cannes, loved it. About Dry Grasses from Turkey, I believe. I don't have my list open now. Yes. Because I was looking up the premise. I'm like, I don't remember what this one's about. A young teacher hopes to be appointed to Istanbul after mandatory duty at a small village. So that sounds pretty Oscar friendly to me. Yeah. So those are my picks. I think I was really excited. So to go back to our hype episode, I had I think like smuggle drafted La Chimera. Because like instead of Indiana, I think I had mentioned it when I drafted Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, because it's also
right. The same movie.
Yeah,
it's basically the same.
But so the reason I didn't put this on my list is because it already premiered and it's gotten kind of like either mixed reviews or just like no one's talking about it. So this could be Italy's pick, but I don't know if it would get nominated. Like it could because it has the cast would be recognizable to an American audience, but other than that, I'm not sure it has what it takes.
Yeah, and I think the only other movie which was mentioned briefly is Fallen Leaves, which is a Finnish movie that was the third place third place winner.
I didn't put that because that sounds like more of like a rom-com. I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but it in terms of like something that would get nominated for Best International Feature. It didn't seem quite to fit.
Yeah, they all these countries choose their individual submission. A short list is formed. That's always the sort of wonky thing of like, what? How exactly does that happen? And then it's voted based on there. So yeah, sometimes some of those movies that might not seem as important or as
just aren't big, or dramatic, big and dramatic,
kind of, fall the wayside.
All right,
so but I'm interested in Fallen Leaves.
Yeah, same.
I'll say.
Best documentary feature. So I'll just go through my list to get us started. So I have the Michael J. Fox documentary Still, which premiered at Sundance and everyone seemed to love. I have not heard a bad thing about it. So I think that's pretty good to get in here. The Deepest Breath. Usually there's a Netflix documentary that ends in here, like a nature documentary. Like My Octopus Teacher, I feel like is the most famous one or infamous one. And I believe this is like a deep sea diving movie.
Okay.
And then The Eternal Memory, which is about Alzheimer's. Which, like just based on this, oftentimes documentary feature, it leans very heavy in its subject matter. So that's partly why I put it in there. Beyond Utopia, which is about the border between North and South Korea. Which I've heard great things. I think that also might have premiered at Sundance. So Sundance is a pretty good launching pad for documentaries. And this last spot, I had a bunch of ones that I was toying with, but ultimately I was listening to Next Best Picture podcast, and they mentioned that there's a documentary that I think is going to be at TIFF. I wish I'd written down which film festival they said it was going to be at. But it's called The Pigeon Tunnel, and it's about the author of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, John Le Carre. Is that how? Okay. And they kind of describe this as like a sleeper entry. Like no one's talking about it right now, but it's probably once people see it, it'll probably be in the conversation. So those are my 5 other contenders. Where there's I think this also premiered at Sundance, a documentary about piano students competing against each other called Piano Forte. Little Richard had a documentary, though I was like, that one didn't seem to be as well received as the Michael J. Fox one when it came out at Sundance. So I was like, well, I think there's not room for both of them. Like there's only room for one
Probably.
celebrity bio documentary, right?
And if it's not going to be, if there's going to be two, it's probably not the Little Richard one.
Right. Wait, which one are you thinking of?
Well, I was thinking the Sylvester Stallone one.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I didn't even have that on here. Right. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how good that. Yeah. So there's a lot. There's oversaturation in the celebrity documentary market
Right.
this year.
Yeah.
And
The other one.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good.
The other one that I had heard about from Sundance, which I don't know particularly how good it is or if it has a lot of traction, is called King Coal, which is about like life in Appalachia with coal miners, and I think centered on a young-ish. I actually don't know how young the girl is supposed to be, but like the girl who dreams of doing something else, but like is surrounded by the reality of the coal mining world and also the sort of myths of like, you know, how like fundamental and important it is for, you know, for America in that Joe Manchin style of coal being still so crucial. So that, you know, that seemed like certainly like could be very relevant and is something that if it gets some traction could get some attention.
All right, we ready for score?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
So yeah, in terms of score, I mean, you know, now that we're sort of moving away from those first few are just kind of like, yeah, I don't know, movies, like they're their own kind of thing. They're little nubs of separate movies. Now it's like, you know, the wider scope of movies, but it really, a lot of it does sort of end up dependent on, you know, the quality of movies we haven't seen yet. In terms of what's come out that I feel like, all right, like this has a almost like guaranteed spot. I think Ludwig Göransson's score for Oppenheimer is locked in. You know, even the people who maybe, you know, had issues with Oppenheimer or thought, you know, it went on too long or it was boring, were like, oh, well, like the parts of the score were absolutely incredible, and it's very omnipresent. It's doing a lot of work. There's a lot of music there, so you know, that's always necessarily the way that something has to be picked. But I think that, you know, to begin opening the door for the possibility that, oh, Oppenheimer could be that movie that gets 10, 11, 12, 13 nominations. You know, I think score is in the top like 5 of nominations that it's going to secure early as it starts to move forward.
Yeah, I was going to say we're probably going to have a lot of repeat nominees from here on out for that reason, just because of the whole Barbenheimer factor.
Right. So, you know, I have a couple of things that I would love to get nominated from movies that have already come out. I will say the two that to me feel like, you know, two that haven't come out yet, that again, we haven't heard it, but I feel like they're still going to be locks, are Dune Part 2. Hans Zimmer won for the first Dune movie. Run it back. Let's do it again. Maybe it will feel like, you know, more of the same, or it will be, you know, well, he already got an award. And this could be a general problem for Dune Part 2 in the technical categories. Maybe it's been there, done that, and it won't get nominations, but I would assume he's probably in pretty good shape for getting an award.
Nuh-uh.
I also think that if Ludwig and Oppenheimer are the front runner currently, I think if I had to place a bet on someone, again, sight unseen, note unheard for the actual score, it would be the score for Killers of the Flower Moon, because that was written by Robbie Robertson of the band, who recently passed in the last week or two. So as a sort of posthumous, here's for all the good work you've done, here's for all the collaborations you've done in the past with Martin Scorsese, even if Killers of the Flower Moon kind of fades into the Irishman, the Fablemans of the movie that everyone is assuming is a front runner, but actually just kind of, you know, withers out by the time of the actual awards.
I feel like because that happened with the Irishman, that can't happen again, right?
We're gonna get there.
Okay. Right.
I think it might be Marty's time again, but we'll see. That's one of the narratives. That's one of the intertwining narratives. But I think that the you know, oh, we can award this movie especially if Killers of the Flower Moon isn't going to get a lot else, it might be let's get it something, and let's get Robbie Robertson this posthumous award. So yeah, I kind of had those three as locked in for sure. We also have 2 scores this year from Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. They're going to do the score for the Fincher movie, The Killer, and also, surprising me, I didn't realize this was happening until the credits rolled. They do the credits scores for the Ninja Turtles movie, Mutant Mayhem, and it's great. It's absolutely wonderful. So I feel like it's possible one of those 2 could get it. We've got again, Spider-Verse. I have to, again, I'm in the dark. I haven't seen it, but I'm assuming from what I've heard,
It's good.
the score is incredible. And if that movie's starting to get some momentum, it could move over. Thomas Newman has a lot of, sort of, he's a guy who's always around. He's did Elemental. That could work for him. And, potential, he doesn't need it. He hasn't, he's won plenty of awards, but he's been nominated so many more times. Is there this might be the last hurrah for John Williams for the Indiana Jones movie? Do they at least get him the nomination?
Right.
The
only reason I didn't do that was because I feel like we've done that more than one time before. And so I think people are just done. They're going to be like, he's good now. I think that's my prediction.
Can we get him to 60 nominations?
But yeah, I had a very similar list. So I had Oppenheimer, Killers of the Flower Moon, Dune Part 2, Elemental, which actually I could say, I was pretty lukewarm on the movie. It was fine, but I didn't love it. But the score actually was really good. And I have The Killer because I think people are going to be like, Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross, yes. If they have to choose between Turtles and a David Fincher serial killer movie, I think they're going to go for The Killer.
Right.
So also, I don't think there's room for 2 animated movie scores in here. That seems weird.
Fair.
So that's kind of how I arrived at my opinion. But I think this is solid. I don't think we need to hash this out anymore. That seems good.
But you think Elemental will be over Spider-Verse in terms of just the Newman factor?
But yeah, because it's Thomas Newman. Yeah, I think Thomas Newman is a bigger name than Daniel Pemberton, even though he's done good stuff. So, but yeah, if there were an upset to my predictions, that would probably be it. It would be Spider-Verse knocking out one of these. But I totally agree. I totally agree that the first 3 you mentioned are as close to a lock as we can have at this point.
Yeah, I also, again, to preview the Barbenheimer of it all, I'm like, there were so many songs that were important in Barbie. I was like, but I remember feeling like, oh, the score is good too. Like, the score really captures like the vibe, but I don't know if it was prominent enough. Again,
right. I think the songs are going to overshadow, and this is probably a good segue into the next category, but the songs I think are going to overshadow the score.
It is. I will just note we have Ferrari, also Daniel Pemberton on here, just in case that becomes really good and gets nominated. We've said it on our episode. We're on the record.
Yeah, I can see. So I think Ferrari has a lot of potential, Oscar potential, but for score in particular, I feel like it's probably going to be one of those things where if there's a sweep happening, it gets swept up in the hype for the movie generally. But I don't think I don't really picture just the score for that. But I haven't seen the movie, obviously, so I'm don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah.
This is going way too long, and we should probably cut this. But I do want to say this: do you know who has seen that movie?
Who?
The handyman that Jasmine and I used a few times, who no longer talks to us because we're not famous enough to talk to him. He ended up getting booked for a job at Anna Kendrick's house. And through Anna Kendrick, he now only works with like famous rich people in the Hollywood Hills and Beverly Hills. And one of the people he did something for was Michael Mann, who was like, do you want to come over to my house and see this new movie I did? Because I'm showing it to like 8 people and I want to know what your opinion is. And so he saw it. He was like, it's good. He's a nice, perfectly nice guy from, I think, Poland or Croatia. And he was just like, I don't know. I don't really watch a lot of movies, but it was good. And he's really nice.
And
then he stopped talking to us. He's handyman to the stars.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's a great story. I love it.
So yeah, according to Adam, our former handyman, Ferrari good.
Okay, so best original song. I actually had a really hard time with this and went through many YouTube videos to try to come to some kind of decision. And then I just got sucked into like enjoying a lot of the songs. And so, but here's the thing. everybody's saying Billie Eilish Barbie song. But I need Ryan Gosling versus Jack Black in this category.
Look,
I need it.
This is the thing that gets the two butterflies, whatever the song from Encanto
Dos
is, instead of
yeah.
we need to talk about Bruno. Like, wild. Like, that's let's not be crazy, folks. Like, and there can be multiple songs from one movie. We could have the Billie Eilish. Billie Eilish has her Oscar. Put her aside.
Right. She
Ryan
just won.
Gosling,
She just won
just
for a
Ken.
James Bond movie. Like,
Yeah, for a pretty good James Bond song.
Yeah. So
it was fine.
But the thing is, like, everyone keeps saying that the what was I made for, I believe is the name of the song, is just the type of song that gets into this category over all the other ones. So, but again, I'm Just Ken needs to happen. I actually really like the Dua Lipa song from Barbie as well, and the and the Lizzo song.
Wow.
Though I don't think anyone wants to go near Lizzo right now, so
yeah, I don't know.
So I don't think that's going to happen
Academy votes
anytime soon. But
no, I think she has been hired for Chicken Run too. However,
oh really?
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, that would be funny if if they would construct an entire cast out of like canceled people.
Yes.
Anyway, so I have I'm Just Ken and Peaches from Super Mario Brothers, which my kids still sing and ask for me to play in the car. So, and I think I'm picturing. See, I really was like selfish when I was putting together my list for this category because I was like down to programming the Oscar ceremony. I was like, look, we have a sing-off between Jack Black and Ryan Gosling where they both sing these songs. There's some kind of weird mashup. Like, let's make this happen. Who doesn't want that?
Amazing.
Anyway, so the other thing,
the other three nominees, presumably.
Oh, that's true. Well, it would be just them as like the opening number or something like that, right? Like that's what I was picturing, and then everyone else can have their own slot. But anyway, but just imagine both of them hamming it up at each other aggressively. I need that. I need that in my life. Anyway, also like the songs are actually very good. That's the thing. Important. And that probably means that one of them or both of them will not be nominated. Yeah. But
I will just say La La Land and Slumdog Millionaire immediately jump out to me. I know there are others as movies that had prominent music components to it and were highly nominated frontrunner movies. One famously won, one maybe more famously didn't win Best Picture. And there's no reason that the two songs from Barbie can't be nominated.
Okay.
Like I think that both of them could get there. And that's something that I think we can make happen. But yeah, I mean, I'm Just Ken is like the thing. Again, it's the Bruno of this movie.
Right.
And I think that we have more than enough time to make sure we don't screw this up again.
All right. The rest of my list was, the musicals. If there's a musical happening in any given year, usually a song from that ends up on here. So The Color Purple undoubtedly will have an original song. So The Color Purple, in case you're not aware, listeners, it's not just a remake of the movie or like just an adaptation of the novel. It is an adaptation of the Broadway musical based on the novel. So inevitably they're going to write some new song for this so it can get in here, I think. And then I have The Wish, like the titular wish from Disney's Wish. And this is why I ended up watching the trailer so many times because I was like, I need to hear the song. And there's not really enough of it in the trailer for me to decide one way or the other musically if it needs to be in here. But I feel like if there's a big Disney movie, if it does well, then I think that is has a spot in here if it wants it. And then this last one, get ready, folks, is Gonna Be You, the Dolly Parton song from 80 for Brady.
Oh, nice.
Hear me out.
I like that pick.
So I think I can't take full credit for this. I saw this on a bunch, like at least one person's list. I can't remember whose. Maybe I think it was Next Best Picture where like a bunch of because they do a consensus list on their website. And they also do there's like 10 of them that work on for Next Best Picture. And like they each do their individual lists for each category. And so I think it was like this came up more than once. And I was like, really? And then I went and watched the music video. And it is two things. One, it is exactly the type of song that ends up getting nominated for an Oscar. It's like generic, forgettable, but somehow catchy, earwormy anthem. Like it's the exact type of song that will get nominated and then no one will remember afterwards. You know what I mean?
Wait, do you mean like Traveling Through from Transamerica? The last time Dolly Parton was nominated for an Oscar?
I had forgotten that. Sure. But here's the other thing. If you go watch the YouTube video of the music video, it is Dolly Parton and 3 other famous musical artists of the same age.
Oh.
All wearing, including Gloria Estefan, all wearing Patriots jerseys.
Wow.
Just like the movie. And so that's just as I was watching this, I was just like, this is the type of thing that is like such a train wreck and so cheesy that it has to get nominated. It just has to. The other thing too is that like I would love for this to get nominated to force Greg, who's our Oscar completionist, to watch 80 for Brady.
Which I'm going to tell you, I've seen 80 for Brady.
Wait, really?
It's pretty good.
Wait, what?
Like it's not like great. Maybe it's not good. It's a movie with like, it's like a current day version of Grumpy Old Men, where it's just like, these actors, they're all old now, and now they're in a comedy together. Like, and they're just kind of like making all these jokes. Now, does it help that I'm from New England, and so I like the fact that they're all rooting for the Patriots, and they all kind of like remind me of old women I know who love the Boston sports. Sure, the people who don't like Tom Brady, that I feel like that would honestly be the biggest, like the fact the movie came out like January 4th, it feels like, and so it's been a while, and it may not be remembered by the time we get to the season. And people who just hate Tom Brady and his football teams, the Patriots and Tampa Bay, will potentially hold them back from it. But like, it's a perfectly cute. It's a movie that I could enjoy because I'm just like, oh, I can picture my parents watched that when it got on Peacock and they thought it was very cute, and I was like, then therefore I thought it was cute. Like, it's in this house. I won't say who watched it. It was like the book club part 2. There's like a sequel to the book club, which is also like
this is a whole genre of movie, is that famous, acclaimed, probably shouldn't be in these movies actresses who are of a certain age that they've grounded up together to be goofy. And granted, I haven't seen any of them. I do enjoy listening to Amanda Dobbins on the Big Picture. I think it was the book club too. She just basically ran through the entire plot play by play.
Yeah. So I watched 80 for Brady, and then the book club 2 unfolded while I existed in the same room as it. I won't say I watched it, but like 80 for Brady was like remarkably better.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, I think this is like this was like actually like humorous in many ways. So anyway, that said, it would be great if Greg had to watch it.
I mean, he already has. Now that you're saying this, I assumed that he wouldn't have. But and full disclosure, listeners, all 3 of us have strong ties to the New England area, either growing up there or living there currently. So like.
Yeah.
Or both.
I could be the annoying person who like leaned over and was just sort of like, they're talking about Julian Edelman, like to give like the background info on the sports jokes that were happening.
Yeah.
Which I think I might need to be there for Greg as well.
Anyway, there are enough people who are anti Tom Brady that I feel like the second this movie gets nominated, it's going to be a thing and it's going to be great.
But I think more people who are pro Dolly, and she has actually been nominated twice for 2 different songs.
Sure.
9 to 5 somehow didn't win. I don't have an answer for that. For how that could have happened. Yeah. But like there could be that could be she's due, right? Like it's time. Let's get her a.
And who wouldn't want her performing live at the Oscars? Like, come on.
No, with Jack Black and Ryan Gosling. Come on. I will say in the defense of the Academy, 9 to 5, an amazing song from an amazing movie, did lose to Fame. From the movie Fame, which is also a pretty solid song.
Okay, yeah. That's a tough beat.
You can't, that's whatever. This is a great list of songs
I'm sorry I didn't put Diane Warren on here.
Well, that's so yeah. The two things I had on our sheet that you didn't mention: generic Diane Warren song, unconfirmed. She has one. I'm just assuming she will.
So I did some digging on this. There's two possibilities, though I didn't look further to fact check one of them, or see if it actually was a thing. So I found an article that said that she was going to do the the main song for the Flaming Hot Cheetos movie, which is out.
Oh,
I haven't seen.
yeah.
But then
It's not listed on her.
I was like, why aren't people? But then people who have her in their predictions have Untitled Diane Warren documentary. So apparently, it's a documentary that she might be working on. So I was like, I'm like, if she already wrote a Flaming Hot Cheetos song, why is that not the thing that we're?
I think that might just be basing it on the assumption that like her last like 5 or 6 nominations have been from documentaries.
Okay.
And that basically she's just pumping out songs and then documentary filmmakers are coming to her and being like, do you want to do a song?
Yeah.
And then she's just like, yeah, I'll put some lyrics on the music I've already written and we'll figure it out. And the other thing I'll say, and I think you had a key phrase when you were talking about Wish from the movie Wish, based on the wishes of people in the past. That if that movie is successful, then it may get a song nominated. I think that if there isn't another sort of successful movie that comes out and grabs it, there's still the possibility that Disney might try to push for one of the new Little Mermaid songs, because there were, I think, 2 or 3. I didn't see the new Little Mermaid. I didn't hear really anything good about the new Little Mermaid. However, it's Menken and Lin-Manuel Miranda, and Lin is still chasing the EGOT. And so, is there some like grasp at hope that he'll be able to sneak in the door and then maybe build some momentum, especially when potentially Ryan Gosling and Jack Black cannot campaign when the time comes for their songs.
True. So I have seen The Little Mermaid. My short take is it was not as bad as I thought. It still does not justify its existence. But, my daughter, when we were leaving the theater, was singing the like Ariel gets her voice back refrain, which I'm not going to try to sing. As we're leaving the theater, she sings it all the time, and it's because she saw that movie. It's not because of the original animated movie, which she has technically seen, but I don't think that's why she sings the right. Anyway, so here's the thing with this is that I was like, I can kind of see the Scuttlebutt song getting in here, which you haven't seen the movie, so you don't know what that is. But Awkwafina basically does a Lin-Manuel Miranda rap, which, to be honest, as much as I love Lin-Manuel Miranda and as much as I love Awkwafina, because I know she's not for everybody, but like, I love both of them. But it really sounds like a song that Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote in his car on the way to something else. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, it's just, yeah, it's not good.
He went deep in the archives of rejected materials from one of his real shows. Right. It was like,
it's really just him riffing on the word scuttlebutt and like making bad puns and stuff, which I adore bad puns, but like, it just feels, it really does feel like it did not get his full attention.
Lin-Manuel Miranda's version of chopping broccoli.
Yes. But like, I can see it getting in just because of the Lin-Manuel Miranda factor. And like, it would be fun to have Awkwafina performing it probably at the Oscars. But here's the thing is that I actually think the other song that would be new, actually there are 2 other songs, but one of them, Wild Uncharted Waters, is actually legitimately good. Like from a Broadway musical perspective, like at least I thought. And the guy who plays Eric, whose name I can't remember now, I should have written it down. He actually was quite good. And the best thing that the Little Mermaid movie does, and I've already talked too long about the Little Mermaid, but the best thing that this movie does, but we didn't do a separate review of it, so this is the only time I'm going to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, this is where we get to slide in our short, medium takes.
The best thing about The Little Mermaid in terms of new material is that it fleshes out Eric as a character a lot. Like, it actually makes him like a real human and likable, and like you understand why he and Ariel would be together. Like it makes like that part is that's the best contribution that movie makes, I think. And that's the Wild Uncharted Waters is his song. So that's my shout out to The Little Mermaid.
Yeah, again, I think it would be a composer narrative, or like, can we get these two guys, especially
Sure.
Lin-Manuel Miranda, an award? But I think that's only if they're like,
The Alan Menken song much more likely to get nominated over that is the what's it called? It's like One for the First Time, something like that. I don't know. It's like an Ariel song that's like a much more makes more sense.
Right. And then what I was going to say is, if say Killers of the Flower Moon has a song from Robbie Robertson that's like played over the credits, like there might be something like that we don't even know about that is going to like, one of these movies that is in the conversation is going to have something that will pick up some momentum. So we don't know.
Okay. All right. Production design. I've got Barbie, Oppenheimer, Killers of the Flower Moon. Again, these are familiar now. Dune Part 2 and Poor Things. Because one, from the trailer, production design looks gorgeously wacky. And it's period, which is always a plus in the craft categories, like design, production design, and costume.
Period, but also fantastical.
At
least at some points, they're in some weird floating world that exists. That's is that real? Is it a dream? I don't know, but it looks incredible, especially on what seems to be a relatively low budget movie. So I think that's a great shout. The other four, that it kind of feels like, well, that's chalk, but like, I don't know, like who knocks any of them out? Again, we haven't seen Dune 2.
It's not coming out, guys.
Or Killers of the Flower Moon, but like, I don't know. There's the only other ones that I even had as possibilities, like Napoleon, big historical epic. If that gets some momentum, could that come in down here? I wouldn't expect it to, but maybe. And similar for The Color Purple. I think again, it's if these movies start to be juggernauts or start to really like get some headwinds, will they get a craft category like this as well and sweep out something like Poor Things or I don't know. I really think Barbenheimer is going to be unbeatable. Not unbeatable in terms of winning necessarily, but in terms of nominations.
In this category,
it should be Barbie's, right?
Yeah, it's like, Barbie's to lose for sure.
Yeah. We do have on here, and I think we need to do it like just an Asteroid City shout out. Very strange how infrequently Wes Anderson movies get looked at for production design, but I think that
and that's why I didn't put it in here based on historical precedent. I was like, it should be in here. That's probably the one behind Barbie, maybe, that I would pick the most personally.
Yeah. It also feels just like that movie's already kind of come and gone and forgotten. It has that French Dispatch.
Yep.
Like unfortunate, like people are just sort of like, okay. And like, it's weird because now it's on whatever, it's either Paramount or Peacock is the service that has it. And I'm starting to get like, see people just be kind of like, hey, Asteroid City, like this is pretty good. And it's like, yeah, where were you? But I think that there is still like that Wes Anderson arm's length, approach to telling the stories that puts enough people off that he ends up not working. So yeah, I think that those five are a great call.
There's also only room for one movie that built an entire Southwest city. So sorry, Asteroid City, Oppenheimer beat you to it.
Right. Especially because Oppenheimer did it to look realistic, whereas Asteroid City did it to look with the artifice of it all.
I would love it if they both got nominated purely for the montage in which we put both of them back to back. That'd be really funny.
Yes. Jason Schwartzman looking at the atomic bomb and then cutting to the test. All right, so next we have costume design. I only have these four movies that were put on the spreadsheet. Barbie, again, it feels like it would have to be some sort of falling away of Barbie where everyone's just like, I don't know, we don't want to reward that, for it to certainly not be nominated, if not to be the front runner. I'm realizing, I mean, in the zone of things that we've already been talking about, Oppenheimer is not like particularly flashy, but it is a period piece with a lot of people in a lot of different scenes. Maybe I wouldn't say like definitely for sure. And in terms of movies that haven't come out yet, Killers of the Flower Moon as the period piece, Napoleon, big war movie, all the uniforms, that's good stuff. And I thought The Color Purple, just again, if that has some momentum, that has the sort of very specific era and subcultures that are going to be represented in that movie. And Dune Part 2, again, like I think won it in the past, but just if you want to have some of the fantasy stuff, that's in there as well.
Yeah.
So that was 6 movies when I said I only had 4.
That's
As
okay.
I started talking, I realized there were 2 more.
That's fine. My 5 were Barbie, Killers of the Flower Moon, Poor Things, Napoleon, and Dune Part 2. So Dune Part 2, I really had to go all or nothing overall because I was like, well, either it's going to be a repeat where it just dominates in all these craft categories. I can't just put it for like 1 or 2. Like I have to, if I'm going to put it at all, right? If it's going to do well, have any Oscars traction, it's going to be in multiple categories.
It won't.
Napoleon is just too much of the type of period stuff that this category eats up. So regardless of that movie could be terrible, and it could still get a costume design nomination. So that's why I have that in there. And then Poor Things, it's just it's that the sort of like whimsy, anything that is like really over the top looking, I think could easily get in here.
And it has that sort of Victorian vibe too.
Yeah, and the only reason I didn't have Color Purple or Oppenheimer in here was that it was not this category always like favors period costumes, but less so the more modern you get. Right. And granted, Color Purple not that modern, but like Oppenheimer is like almost too contemporary a period. For like this category historically really favors the like 18th 19th century costumes.
Yeah, I agree. I hear you. I hear you on that. My overall like feeling on Dune Part 2, this is not based on anything obviously except general vibes, is I think it gets nominated for a ton of awards below the line, like the one like the first one did, and then it wins almost none of them. That's my guess. Because I think other movies come in and take over, but then it's also possible the movie's great, everyone's excited about it, and it actually gets more. Could it be the Everything Everywhere that picks up a crooked number of awards that it will include some of these lower ones too? I don't know.
All right. Next up is makeup and hairstyling. So I have Poor Things. I mean, if you just seen the trailer and see Emma Stone's face. Like that alone's going to get a makeup nomination. Mm-hmm. Maestro, regardless of whether or not you think the nose plays, the nose is the nose. So I think that's definitely getting in here. And I also actually predict that as long as the movie is decent enough, people are not going to care about the nose anymore. Like after a certain point, you know what I mean? Like I think that discourse is going to fall away eventually. I have Priscilla, just because like there's going to be a lot of hair in that movie. Probably. And if it is going to get, I don't foresee Priscilla having a lot of traction because again, I think people are going to be like, we just did this with Elvis. And regardless of how good it is. So, but I think it could still get in here, even if that's the case. I have Dune Part 2, again, like Austin Butler haunting this category. I feel like for his makeup alone, right? Because he's bald and has all the, if you haven't seen any of the promotional materials for Dune Part 2, his character is bald and he's totally covered in like white makeup. So I think that alone could get it in here. And then my sneaky pick, a movie that has not been well reviewed, but Golda. So this is the Golda Meir biopic with Helen Mirren, yes. Which I checked does not have good reviews. Like I think it just came out. But apparently her makeup is super good.
That's good. Yeah. And that's a great choice because there is always usually, I would say, one or two of those movies where it's just like, what? Yeah. Like the Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, I was in costume design, where it's just kind of like, oh, like, yeah, I guess that makes sense without like necessarily any other statement or comment about the quality of the movie, good or bad,
Right.
beyond it, but just like, yep, that did this thing, and it's in that pocket, and it got the nomination for it.
Yeah. So I was trying to think like, okay, what's a movie that is not going to show up anywhere else and everyone's going to be confused by or like have to go look up what it is. So that was my pick for that one. All right. VFX.
I
go for it.
Oh, I was just going
Are
to
you
say
gonna ask
I like those. I will just say it's possible both either of Barbenheimer could, if they're getting a lot of momentum here, they do have enough moments of makeup and some hair components that those could sneak in. Will it overturn any of the ones you said? I don't know, but that's all.
For sure. All right. What are your thoughts on VFX? This is a weird category oftentimes because it's the place that blockbusters get into where they don't get in other places. Right. So that I was trying to remind myself of that as I was putting my list together.
Yeah, like usually this is where like the populist movies go, where it's like, oh yeah, these are the ones that made a lot of money. But like, the movies that made a lot of money this year, it's like, do they have a lot of VFX? Like, could you like? There's all the weird like, practical things that Nolan did for Oppenheimer, but like, would that generate a lot of interest in the visual effects thing? I don't think so. Like, I don't think that would get there.
So
you know what I mean?
I had two movies on my list that fall into this category, I think, of like the anti-VFX okay. Where it's like the not digital or like we did this ourselves. So I have Oppenheimer for that reason, because I think even if it's not CGI at all, right, which there isn't any in it, I think it's all practical. I believe.
I think he said there's no CGI. Yeah. Like, is that true? Probably.
Right.
I guess I can trust.
But I think like for a movie that is trying to draw a line in the sand and be like, we didn't use any CG.
Right.
I think the what they are able to accomplish visually, I think people are still going to nominate it. Right. At least that's my theory. It's going to be like a backlash to like CGI, because CGI has not fared well in just public discourse recently. For various reasons. And then I also have Dead Reckoning Part 1 for that same reason, where it's going to be like, oh, you used effects to kind of like spruce up Tom Cruise doing death-defying stunts.
Right. Like this, we don't have a stunt category, but we can reward all the ways that you, worked around these things. I mean, I'm in favor of that for sure. I didn't think that they would actually do it.
Yeah, they might not, but I think I wanted to go on a limb and be like, I think that's this nominations that's this category are going to make a statement. And so the other ones I have are Dune Part 2.
Seriously, stop talking about Dune.
It's more traditional. I have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 because legitimately the VFX in that is very good. With all the like, and it's like a good mix of like, the alien animal people. Some of them have actual costumes. Some of them are CGI. I think it's a good mix. Animating Baby Rocket alone, I feel like deserves an Oscar.
Right. No, I mean, and I think that's the only traditional effects heavy blockbuster this year. Like, it's Mario
that actually did
isn't going to be as visual effects, and then Barbie and Oppenheimer. Yeah, just in terms of the highest grossers, that's all the other ones have kind of faded. Or
it's not going to be the Flash. Flash is not getting in here.
It's not going to be
the VFX in that I thought were like extra terrible. It's really
and to continue our workers' rights solidarity thing. A lot of those is because the studios and you do a very bad job of how they line up the order and the processing of things, and they demand that the artists that work on this have turn it around with very little deadlines, and they're all very good at their jobs, but that doesn't mean the product ends up being good because of the choices that are made above their heads.
Absolutely. So my sleeper pick in here is Gareth Edwards, the creator.
Okay.
And that's because if you look at the trailer, there's just a lot of effects that they have to use, and just like the animating of all the robots and stuff like that. Like, I think it looks good. So
Yeah,
That's going to be
I like that.
my sneaky. That's my sneaky pick that people won't see coming.
My long shot picks. One that I haven't seen, but it's just sort of like if this has some traction, I could see this being a place it goes. Is Napoleon, where I think there is some of that like gladiator throwback of like, oh, these huge battles, they got a lot of people, but they also augmented it with CGI stuff, and that that could be something where it gets in there. If it's not terrible, because again, we don't know, maybe it's terrible and no one cares. Or it's great, but no one cares. It's another last duel. And then if they're casting around for like, well, I don't know, what's another thing that we could do? Why not Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, which I feel like it didn't like fire up the box office necessarily, but I feel like I don't know anybody who hasn't been like, that was fun, like I like that, and it was very effects heavy, and I think the effects were good,
They're
and
good enough.
a big fantastical thing.
I like the pudgy dragon.
Yes,
unsurprised. That's very on brand for me. I understand, but
yes. No, I think that makes sense.
All right, we're going to pause here and leave all the big hitter categories for part 2, a second episode. Can't believe we went this long, although / can believe we went this long.
Yes,
because we always go this long. So you can look forward to our breakdown of the rest of the acting categories: best director, best picture, editing, cinematography, in part 2,
and screenplays.
And screenplays. Can't forget those. We are a pro writing podcast.
It's true.
That was not a purposeful omission. But in the meantime, PT, where can people follow the Long Take Review?
They can follow us on Instagram at the Long Take Review, and technically also on Threads, but I haven't logged in on Threads in a long time. But follow us on Instagram, send us a message, and look wherever you find your podcasts. Give us a subscribe, leave a rating and a review if you would like to do that, because that would be great for us.
Thanks. And you can find me at Sopchockchai, SOPCHOCKCHAI on Instagram and Threads, and Qui-Gon Jinn on Letterboxd. Thanks for listening. To be continued. Thank you for listening. You can follow The Long Take on Substack at thelongtake.substack.com. Subscribe for free to receive reviews of films with Oscar buzz, as well as new films and series from pop franchises like Star Wars and Marvel.
Yeah, somewhere in the beginning when we're like, we set up what we're gonna do. I don't know if we could just like pop in like, it's us from the future. It's late and we talk too long and we realize we can't do all of this in one time.
I think I might just use what you just said.
Keep listening to all the awards you don't care about.
Please.
The ones you do care about, we'll talk about it some other time.
We are delirious because we need to go to bed.
Yeah. Jen's got to teach in the morning.
I really do. Oh, this was a bad plan.